When we talk about giant shifts in momentum, we usually expect some kind of loud, undeniable
Oh,
noise.
for sure. Like a massive freight train just slamming on its brakes.
Right. You hear the metal screeching, you see sparks flying everywhere, and everyone inside gets, physically thrown out of their seats.
You brace for that kind of impact because the signals are just completely overwhelming.
Exactly. You expect a visceral event, something you can feel rattling in your bones before the dust even settles.
But, well, you look at economics.
Yeah. Specifically, you look at the real estate market. Sometimes that massive momentum shift happens in total eerie silence.
It really does.
You wake up on a Tuesday, the sun is shining, the lawns in the neighborhood are perfectly mowed, there is absolutely no chaos in the streets.
Right, the landscape looks identical to yesterday.
But the invisible gravity of the entire neighborhood is completely reversed. The physics of the space have fundamentally altered without a single physical brick moving.
It feels like an invisible earthquake, you know? The underlying tectonic plates of power and leverage have just completely swapped positions.
That silent earthquake is the exact phenomenon we are putting under the microscope today. Welcome to the deep dive, by the way.
Glad to be here for this one. It's a fascinating topic.
It really is. We've got an incredibly sharp brief in front of us titled The Viridian Market Shift.
Ah, yes. The March 2026 Housing Report.
Right. And the insights we are looking at come directly from Nikki and John Baptiste.
With Local Realty Agency Mid-Cities.
Exactly. They are actively on the ground measuring this invisible gravity shift in real time.
And what Nikki and John are doing here, it goes far beyond a typical spreadsheet dump.
Oh, totally.
They are providing the psychological weather report of a premium housing market at the exact microsecond the seasons change.
Like tracking human behavior disguised as numbers?
That's exactly what it is.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because for you, the listener, whether you are trying to buy a house, thinking about selling one, or you're just intensely curious about how the broader economy breathes, adapts, and shifts, Viridian is our laboratory today.
The perfect test case.
We are going to decode how just a few very specific, seemingly boring metrics actually signal a massive transfer of power in a premium market.
And to truly grasp the shifting tides that Nikki and John highlight, we have to start with the raw, unyielding math.
The supply and demand currently playing out in Viridian.
Right. We have to look at the inventory shock.
Because the numbers they provide are jarring when you put them side by side.
Very jarring.
According to the report, there are currently 79 homes sitting actively on the market in Viridian, but only 16 have actually sold.
79 active listings versus 16 closed deals. I mean, that ratio is the entire foundation of the shift.
Mathematically, that pushes the housing supply in this area to about 5 months.
Yep. A 5-month supply.
And I want to pause and visualize this because 5 months of supply sounds like a really dry, technical textbook term.
It does sound a bit academic.
Right. So think about a high-stakes game of musical chairs.
Oh, I like that.
In a white-hot seller's market, you have 10 panicked people aggressively circling one single chair.
Just waiting for the music to stop.
And when it does, it's an absolute bloodbath to get that seat.
Pure chaos.
But hitting a 5-month supply means the game has been completely turned inside out.
How so?
Well, now you walk into the room and there are 79 empty chairs and only 16 people casually strolling around deciding if they even want to sit down.
The visual of those empty chairs perfectly captures the sudden realization of leverage.
Which is exactly what we need to talk about. Explain that psychological shift for us. What happens to a buyer when they realize they aren't competing with a crowd anymore?
Well, we are talking about a profound psychological pivot here.
Yeah.
In that previous market you mentioned, the one with 10 people fighting for one share, the buyer is operating entirely out of primal fear.
Fear of missing out.
Exactly. The fear of being priced out of the neighborhood forever. So buyers do desperate, irrational things.
Like waiving inspections.
Right. They waive their inspection contingencies. They bid $50,000 over the asking price.
Just throwing money at the problem.
They ignore a sagging roof or an aging HVAC system because their only goal is to secure the asset before someone else does.
The seller basically holds all the cards and dictates reality.
The seller is sitting on a throne, just pointing at the highest bidder.
But then we hit this new data.
Right. Nikki and John's data zeroes in on this 5-month supply threshold. And in real estate economics, a 5 to 6 month supply is generally considered a balanced, neutral market.
Neutral, not crash.
Exactly. However, when you're coming straight down from a fever-pitch seller's market, hitting that 5-month mark feels like hitting a brick wall at 60 miles an hour.
Ouch.
The
Yeah.
desperation instantly vaporizes.
Mhm.
A buyer looks at those 79 available homes and a new thought forms.
Which is?
I have options. If this seller refuses to negotiate on the closing costs or the repairs, the seller 3 doors down will.
The power of choice returns.
Completely.
And it seems like that sweat, that anxiety and desperation doesn't just disappear, it transfers directly onto the shoulders of the seller.
It absolutely changes sides.
Because the person who used to be able to stick a piece of cardboard in their front yard and watch 5 offers roll in over the weekend, they're now staring out their front window watching their home sit untouched for weeks.
They are suddenly the ones who have to start compromising to attract those 16 wandering buyers.
The seller realizes they are no longer the only game in town.
They are now an applicant trying to win the approval of a highly selective buyer.
Wow. Okay, so if buyers suddenly hold all the leverage and sellers are sweating out these long weeks, the immediate instinct, especially given how we constantly hear about real estate in the news, is to sound the alarm.
Oh, of course. Panic is the default setting.
You want to run around screaming that the sky is falling. You want to call it a massive market crash.
Human nature loves to catastrophize whenever momentum shifts downward. We assume any drop is a cliff.
But here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Nikki and John's data reveals a crucial, subtle distinction about what is actually happening to home values in Viridian. And they specifically push back against the panic narrative.
They do.
Let's look at the actual dollar amounts. The current median price in Viridian is $494,575.
A very specific, sobering number.
Nearly $495,000. But last year, the median price was an even $550,000.
That is a severe haircut by any standard.
It's massive, and the report explicitly labels this a reset, not a collapse.
Right.
A reset.
I have to push back a little on this terminology, though. If I'm a homeowner in Viridian, and the median home in my neighborhood loses over $50,000 in perceived value in just 12 months?
Yeah.
How on earth is that not a collapse? 50 grand is a year's salary for a lot of people.
It really is. It's a college tuition fund. To see that evaporate from your household net worth, that feels exactly like a crash. Why are Nikki and John so insistent that this is just a reset?
I completely understand why it feels catastrophic to the seller, watching that equity vanish from their estimate.
Right.
But what's fascinating here is the secondary metric that Nikki and John included right alongside that steep price drop.
Okay, the days on market.
Exactly. The crucial key to their entire analysis, the thing that separates a reset from a ruin, is that metric called days on market.
How long the house physically sits available before someone signs a contract to buy it.
Yep. The report states that despite this massive $50,000 drop in median price, homes in Viridian are still taking about 40 days to sell.
Which, according to the brief, is the exact same amount of time it took last year.
And that identical 40-day pace is the smoking gun here.
Wait, really? How so?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture of how economic collapses actually function, a true market crash is characterized by complete and total evaporation of liquidity.
Meaning the money just dries up.
Exactly. In a housing collapse, it isn't just that the prices drop. It's that demand completely leaves the room.
So nobody is buying anything, regardless of how cheap it gets.
Precisely.
Yeah.
In a genuine collapse, the days on market metric skyrockets. Homes sit for 90 days, 120 days, 6 months.
Yeah, it's gathering dust.
You see zero bids at any price point because buyers are either terrified of catching a falling knife or the banking sector has frozen up and they simply cannot secure financing.
But that is emphatically not what is happening in Viridian's 2026 market.
No. The homes are still moving at the exact same velocity, 40 days.
So the buyers are absolutely still there.
The demand is alive, well, and funded. They have the down payments, the banks are happily underwriting the mortgages, and they are signing the closing documents at the identical speed as last year.
They are just strictly, stubbornly refusing to pay yesterday's inflated prices.
Exactly. The fundamental market mechanism isn't broken. It is merely recalibrating to a new equilibrium based on current leverage.
That makes a lot of sense.
That's why Nikki and John call it a reset. The volume of transactions is perfectly healthy. The price tag attached to those transactions has simply sobered up to reflect the 79 available chairs.
That distinction completely reframes the data for me. Think about it like a car engine.
Okay.
A collapse means the engine died on the highway. A reset means the engine is still humming along beautifully, doing exactly what it's supposed to do. We've just successfully negotiated a cheaper price for the gas we're putting into it.
That's a great way to put it. Demand didn't disappear. It evolved. It became highly selective.
Selective. Let's dig into that word.
Let's do it.
Because if demand is alive but suddenly incredibly picky, we have to talk about survival tactics.
The new playbook.
Right. If you are a seller in Viridian today, you are waking up in a drastically different landscape than the neighbor who sold their house 12 months ago.
The previous playbook is effectively obsolete.
So what does this all mean for the seller on the ground? The report notes that Viridian is still considered a premium lifestyle market.
It is.
But Nikki and John explicitly warn that this new environment is utterly unforgiving to sellers. They point out that sellers cannot win by testing the price.
And testing the market is one of the oldest strategies in real estate.
You see it all the time. A seller thinks, my house is probably worth $500,000 based on the comps, but let's list it at $540 just to see if someone bites.
We can always lower it later.
Exactly. It's the equivalent of throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks.
Yep.
What the data from Nikki and John shows us is that in last year's market, the wall was covered in sticky adhesive. You could throw almost any wild number up there, and a desperate buyer would find a way to make it stick.
They were so desperate they didn't care.
But today, that wall is coated in industrial-grade Teflon.
Oh, the spaghetti just slides straight onto the floor.
It really does.
To understand why testing the price is so dangerous right now, we have to look closely at what Nikki and John meant by a premium lifestyle market.
Okay, unpack that for us.
When buyers are shopping in premium neighborhoods like Viridian, they are not just looking for basic shelter.
Right.
They aren't desperate for a roof over their heads by Friday. They are purchasing an aesthetic, a specific community culture, a standard of living.
It's a luxury choice.
And buyers in that demographic are highly educated on market value.
Oh, they've done the homework. They have the real estate apps pinging their phones every morning.
Exactly.
They know exactly what the house down the street sold for 3 days ago, and they know what concessions the builder in the next subdivision is offering.
They possess the exact same data the realtors have. So when a seller comes into a 5-month supply market and tries to test an inflated price, they're uniquely punished by this educated buyer pool.
Because if a home is not priced flawlessly on day one, the buyer simply bypasses it.
Right. Because they have 78 other empty chairs to choose from. Why bother negotiating with someone who is disconnected from reality?
They look at the overpriced listing, roll their eyes, and click on the next tab.
The seller doesn't even get the courtesy of a lowball offer to start a negotiation. They get absolute silence.
And then the listing begins to age. It sits for 14 days, 21 days, 30 days.
And in real estate algorithms and in buyer psychology, a listing that sits too long becomes actively stigmatized.
Buyers see the high days on market number and immediately wonder, what's physically wrong with this house?
Did a previous buyer find foundation issues during an inspection?
So the seller starts sweating and eventually caves, dropping the price.
But the tragedy for the seller is that by the time they drop the price down to what it actually should have been on day one, they've lost the crucial, fresh excitement of being a brand new listing.
They missed their window of maximum visibility.
Yes. Often, to overcome the stigma of sitting on the market, they are forced to drop the price even lower than true market value just to reignite any interest at all.
They end up chasing the market downward.
Exactly. Nikki and John's advice is incredibly stark here. You do not win by testing. You win by swallowing your pride and being flawlessly accurate on the day you list.
You have to price it for the 79-chair market you are actually in today, not the 1-chair market your neighbor got rich on last year.
It requires a profound level of emotional discipline from sellers. They have to detach their ego from their equity, which, frankly, was not a requirement 12 months ago.
Emotional discipline is tough to summon when we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars of personal wealth.
Oh, absolutely.
But stepping back, this has been an incredibly clarifying look at the internal machinery of a housing market. It is fascinating how these interconnected gears dictate the reality for thousands of people.
It really is.
Let's synthesize the key takeaways here so you can spot these same dynamics playing out in your own local economy.
Because the Viridian report serves as a perfect microcosm for the broader shifts we see globally.
It really is the ultimate case study. We started by looking at the raw inventory shock 79 homes available with only 16 selling.
Right.
That simple ratio created a 5-month supply, and we learned that 5 months is the critical threshold where leverage physically transfers.
The musical chairs dynamic inverted, taking the power of choice from the seller and handing it directly to the buyer.
The evaporation of buyer desperation is the catalyst for everything that follows.
It really is the domino that starts it all.
From there, Nikki and John's data highlighted the most counterintuitive insight of the entire brief. We saw a massive $50,000 drop in the median price, bringing it down to $494,575.
But because homes are still selling in the exact same 40-day window as they were last year, we know the engine hasn't died.
We are looking at a healthy, functioning price reset, not a panicked, liquidity-drained collapse. The transactions are still happening. They are just happening at a newly sober price point.
Demand remains robust, but it is now armed with options and absolutely refusing to overpay.
Demand got selective, and because of that selectivity, sellers surviving in a premium market like Viridian have to completely abandon the old strategy of throwing spaghetti at the wall to test inflated prices.
They must be perfectly accurate on day one, or they risk being ignored entirely and chasing the market down.
This raises an important question, though, when we step back and look at the human psychology layered over these numbers.
Oh, I like where this is going. Lay it on me.
We've spent this time analyzing the mechanics of the shift, the leverage, the days on market. But if you are listening to this and trying to understand the human behavior behind the economics, I want you to consider a lingering puzzle.
Okay.
We know the Viridian market shed roughly 10% of its median price in a single year. Yet the physical homes themselves continue to sell at the exact same 40-day speed. What does that tell us about the invisible emotional premium that buyers were so willingly handing over just 12 months ago?
The emotional premium. That is a fascinating phrase.
Have the physical homes in Viridian actually changed over the last 365 days?
Oh.
Are the bricks less sturdy? Is the neighborhood somehow 10% less premium?
Or has the collective psychology of the buyer simply woken up from a fever dream?
Exactly. It forces you to wonder how much of last year's $550,000 price tag was the actual tangible value of the wood, the land, and the school district, and how much of it was just pure, unadulterated panic.
Wow. How much of the price tag is literally just the cost of our own panic?
It perfectly circles back to where we started with the silent earthquake, that invisible gravity in the neighborhood.
Do the lawns look exactly the same?
The houses haven't moved a single inch. There was no loud crash to warn anybody. The physics of the market just quietly reversed. The panic evaporated, and suddenly, everyone is playing a totally different game.